Who is the fairest of them all? Apparently it isn't Snow White.
Jonah Platt, whose father helped produce the latest Snow White film, had some very harsh words for star Rachel Zegler.
I never would have imagined that I would get to be Snow White. So truly just for people to see someone who looks like them, someone who represents a dreamer, no matter what they look like or where they come from.
Rachel Zegler's rise to stardom was nothing short of dazzling. A few years ago, she was the fresh-faced ingenue plucked from obscurity to star in Steven Spielberg's lavish reimagining of West Side Story. Hollywood loves a Cinderella story, and Zegler was a perfect fit, the talented newcomer with the golden voice, poised to take her place among the industry's elite. But fast forward a few years, and that fairy tale trajectory has veered wildly off course, spiraling into a public relations nightmare that has left her career and her reputation dangling by a thread. What happened? How did Rachel Zegler go from Hollywood's golden girl to its most controversial starlet? Let's start at the beginning.
Appeal to join this elite group of Disney princesses. Can you believe it?
No, not at all. It's unbelievable. I mean, I look at that girl and I have no idea what I'm looking at. It's really quite wonderful to be a part of the Disney family, and obviously to join the league of so many wonderful live action princesses, but also so many that have been depicted in animation as well. This is the flagship animation that made Disney what it is.
When Disney announced that Rachel Zegler would be their new Snow White, it seemed like a match made in pop culture heaven. The studio was riding high on the success of its live-action remakes, and casting a Latina actress in the role of one of their most iconic princesses was seen as a bold, progressive move. For a moment, the decision felt like a victory lap for diversity in Hollywood. But almost immediately, the backlash began. Social media lit up with heated debates about the casting choice, with some critics arguing that Zegler didn't fit the traditional image of Snow White, who, let's remember, is described in the original fairy tale as having skin as white as snow. The casting was heralded by some as a modern reinterpretation, but others saw it as yet another example of what they called Disney's woke agenda. Rachel Zegler, barely in her 20s, found herself at the center of a cultural firestorm before the cameras had even started rolling. And then, as if the controversy over her casting wasn't enough, Rachel Zegler began talking. In interviews, she made it clear that her Snow White would be nothing like the character audiences remembered from the 1937 animated classic. The original is extremely outdated, she said in one now infamous interview, her words dripping with the confidence of someone who hadn't yet learned the art of Hollywood diplomacy. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird, so we didn't do that this time. The comments were a direct shot at the original film's beloved narrative, and for many longtime Disney fans, it felt like an attack on something sacred.
I know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different, and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
The backlash was swift and brutal. Social media erupted with accusations that Zegler was ungrateful, that she didn't respect the legacy of the role she'd been given, that she was trying to rewrite history to fit a modern agenda. And while Disney had initially hoped her casting would be celebrated as a step forward, they now found themselves in damage control mode, trying to tamp down the growing outrage without alienating the very fans they relied on to keep the studio afloat. But Rachel didn't stop there. As the months went on and filming began, she continued to make headlines, not for her performance, but for her unfiltered opinions. She called the original Snow White problematic, criticized the prince for being a stalker, and described the film's love story as weird. While these comments may have been intended to highlight the film's updated feminist approach, they only served to deepen the divide between her and the audience. And then there were her political statements.
But it's important to speak about her because Disney picked her to be a princess, right? They're doing all these remakes, and they decided they were going to remake Snow White, and they cast Gal Gadot as the Wicked Witch, and they cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, and it's been an interesting casting because this woman is extraordinarily woke, as everyone is in Hollywood, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
Rachel Zegler wasn't just vocal about her thoughts on Snow White, she was vocal about everything. In the lead-up to the film's release, she took to social media to share her opinions on everything from the U.S. presidential election to the Israel-Palestine conflict. She posted hashtags supporting Palestine, decried former President Donald Trump, and made no effort to temper her tone. One particularly controversial post read, "May Trump supporters never know peace." While her fans applauded her courage and candor, the reaction from the general public, and particularly from Disney's core audience, was far less forgiving.
So anyways, they have been making this film for a very long time because it's just been so scandalized. And so they had to basically put it on ice after people were firstly outraged by Rachel Zegler speaking ill about the prior film.
The timing couldn't have been worse. As the first trailer for Snow White debuted to tepid reviews, Zegler's political posts started making waves online. Conservative commentators accused her of alienating a significant portion of the audience, and calls to boycott the film began to spread like wildfire. Disney executives, already grappling with the fallout from her Snow White comments, were now faced with an even bigger problem. Their leading lady had become a lightning rod for controversy.
The problem with our society can be found with Snow White and what's going on with Snow White. We have too many people that don't know what it's like to...
Meanwhile, behind the scenes, tensions were reportedly brewing between Zegler and her co-star Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen. On paper, the pairing seemed perfect, the fresh-faced newcomer and the established global star coming together to reimagine one of Disney's most beloved tales. But rumors began to circulate that the two actresses were anything but friendly. At the film's Los Angeles premiere, eagle-eyed fans noticed that Zegler and Gadot didn't pose for photos together, nor did they share any warm exchanges on the red carpet. Instead, Zegler was seated 2 rows ahead of Gadot and her family, fueling speculation that the co-stars were being intentionally kept apart. The whispers of a feud grew louder when a fan asked Zegler on Instagram if she and Gadot were presenting together at the Oscars. Zegler's response? A cheeky comment calling Gadot a professional pageant queen. While the remark may have been intended as a harmless joke, it didn't land that way. Fans quickly seized on the comment as evidence of bad blood between the two actresses, and the narrative of a behind-the-scenes rivalry began to gain traction.
We're still waiting.
You see yourself as the evil queen. You are not evil. You are not evil. You're a queen, but you're not evil. What was it like seeing yourself as the evil queen for the first time?
We did not see the clip, so I still haven't seen anything. But when I was in makeup, just like she said, we got to work with such an amazing crew, and it was just like the best it could ever be.
And then came the press tour, or rather, the lack of one. Disney, clearly aware of the growing tensions and the public scrutiny, made the unprecedented decision to keep Zegler and Gadot on separate promotional tracks. There were no joint interviews, no shared red carpet moments, no photo ops to showcase the supposed chemistry between their Snow White and Evil Queen. Instead, the two actresses were sent on entirely different press circuits, with Disney quietly downplaying their interactions. It was a stark departure from the usual promotional playbook, and it only added fuel to the fire. If there was no real problem between Zegler and Gadot, fans wondered, then why go to such lengths to keep them apart? But the most shocking twist came when reports emerged that Disney's own executives were beginning to lose patience with Zegler. According to insiders, the studio had grown increasingly frustrated with her outspoken nature and her inability or unwillingness to toe the company line. One particularly damning report claimed that producer Mark Platt flew across the country to personally reprimand Zegler after her political comments began to draw negative attention. The meeting, which reportedly took place in New York, was said to be tense and confrontational, with Platt warning Zegler about the consequences of her actions. But if Disney had hoped the meeting would rein her in, they were sorely mistaken. Zegler refused to back down, standing by her comments and making it clear that she wouldn't be silenced.
Variety breaks down how after this tweet went viral, the studio was shocked that she would mix a promo tweet with a political statement. As a result, Mark Platt flew to New York to speak with her.
For Disney, it was a nightmare scenario. Their $270 million live-action remake, once poised to be a cornerstone of their box office strategy, was now overshadowed by controversy. Advance ticket sales were sluggish, and early reviews were less than enthusiastic. And while some critics praised Zegler's performance, others couldn't help but note the tension that seemed to radiate from every frame. By the time Snow White hit theaters, the damage had already been done. What should have been a triumphant moment for Zegler and Disney had turned into a public relations disaster. But the most damning blow was yet to come. As the film struggled to find its footing at the box office, whispers began to circulate that Rachel Zegler's days in Hollywood might be numbered.
As Rachel Zegler, hurt the film's box office with her actions in since-deleted comment. This is the exchange.
And just when you thought the storm couldn't get any uglier, whispers began to emerge from the tight-lipped corridors of Hollywood. Rachel Zegler wasn't just in hot water, she was drowning in it. Industry insiders were now suggesting that Hollywood's Golden Gates might be closing on her entirely. Word on the street was that major studios, including Disney itself, were actively looking for ways to distance themselves from Zegler, even reportedly exploring the possibility of terminating existing contracts. The girl who had once been hailed as the future of Hollywood was now being branded as its most untouchable liability. But how did it escalate to this point? Let's unpack the fallout. Behind closed doors, the tension at Disney had reportedly reached a fever pitch. Executives were left scrambling to contain the damage, not just from the catastrophic box office numbers, but also from the tsunami of bad press. According to multiple insiders, the studio's leadership felt blindsided by Zegler's unrelenting stream of controversies. It wasn't just her outspoken political stances or her polarizing comments about the original Snow White. It was the fact that she seemed completely unwilling to play by the unspoken rules of Hollywood diplomacy. She wasn't towing the company line. She wasn't apologizing in ways that felt sincere or strategic. Instead, she was doubling down, tweeting cryptic messages and updating her social media bios as if to taunt the growing wave of critics.
Literally no clue to conclude that. And I love Platt's first saying, "You really want to do this?"
Yeah.
I love his first
That's
saying,
right.
"You really want to
That's
do
right.
this?"
Yeah.
I love that.
The financial stakes for Disney were staggering. By the time Snow White limped through its second weekend in theaters, it had become clear that the film wasn't just underperforming, it was sinking. With a reported production budget nearing 270 million currency units, plus a marketing campaign that likely cost an additional 9 figures, the studio was staring down the barrel of what analysts were calling one of its biggest live-action flops ever. Even the studio's most optimistic projections couldn't paint a rosy picture. The numbers simply didn't add up. And when a movie implodes this spectacularly, someone has to take the fall. The finger-pointing reportedly began almost immediately. Internally, blame was being passed around like a hot potato. Creative executives argued that Zegler's off-screen antics had overshadowed the film's rollout. Marketing teams countered that the movie's feminist reimagining had alienated core Disney fans long before Zegler's comments made headlines. And then there was the increasingly loud conversation about her co-star, Gal Gadot, whose own polarizing political stances had thrown gasoline on an already raging fire. But make no mistake, the bulk of the blame was landing squarely on Zegler's shoulders.
The film received backlash for various reasons in the lead up to its release. Zegler had called the original Snow White movie dated and weird and said Prince Charming was a stalker.
And it wasn't staying behind closed doors. The son of one of the film's producers, Jonah Platt, had already taken to social media to publicly criticize Zegler, calling her behavior immature and narcissistic. His post, though swiftly deleted, sent shockwaves through the industry. It was rare, unheard of even, for someone so directly connected to a major studio project to call out its lead actress in such a personal, scathing way. But the damage had been done. Platt's comments added fuel to the growing narrative that Zegler was not just a misstep for Disney, but a full-blown catastrophe.
No feelings about Israel and Gaza. I don't care at all. I care a little bit more about Rachel Zegler having like an underlying amount of contempt for the intellectual property.
Adding to the chaos were rumors that Disney was quietly consulting its legal team about the possibility of recouping some of its losses by holding Zegler financially accountable. While this kind of action would be unprecedented, some insiders claimed that the studio had grounds to argue that her off-screen behavior had materially harmed the film's performance. The mere suggestion of a lawsuit sent Hollywood's rumor mill into overdrive. Would Disney really go that far? Could they? And if they did, what precedent would it set for other actors who dared to step out of line? But Zegler wasn't just facing backlash from within the industry. The public's reaction to her was growing more venomous by the day. The review bombing on sites like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes had reached absurd proportions, with Snow White now ranked among the worst films of all time according to user scores. Social media was ablaze with memes mocking her performance, her comments, even her appearance. And while some of her fans rallied to her defense, arguing that she was being unfairly scapegoated, their voices were increasingly drowned out by the tidal wave of criticism.
Our next guest made her movie debut as Maria in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Now she dumps the sharks for Seven Dwarfs. Disney's Snow White opens in theaters Friday. Please welcome Rachel Zegler.
And let's not forget the role of Gal Gadot in all of this. While Zegler was absorbing the brunt of the backlash, Gadot was facing her own set of controversies. Her outspoken support for Israel had made her a target of online vitriol, particularly in light of the ongoing geopolitical conflict in the region. According to reports, Disney had to increase Gal Gadot's security at promotional events after she began receiving threats. And while the studio publicly stood by her, insiders claimed that her political stances had created additional headaches for the marketing team, which was already reeling from Zegler's misstep. The irony was impossible to ignore. Disney's two leading ladies, cast as polar opposites in the film, were now embroiled in real-life conflicts that mirrored their on-screen dynamic. But instead of generating buzz for the movie, it was creating a PR nightmare. The dynamic between Zegler and Gadot was another layer of drama that refused to go unnoticed. Rumors of a feud between the two actresses had circulated for months, fueled by their frosty interactions, or lack thereof, at press events. Fans dissected every public appearance, every red carpet photo, every carefully worded interview. Why weren't they posing together? Why did they seem so distant? And why, in an industry that thrives on manufactured camaraderie, was Disney going out of its way to keep them apart? The speculation was endless, and every new rumor only added to the growing perception that Snow White was a project doomed from the start.
Like, did you have to audition for Snow White, or like, oh, they saw you in West Side Story, they're like, you're Snow White?
West Side Story was kind of nowhere near coming out. We were about like 6 months away from release, and no footage had been seen. And I actually got a really glowing recommendation from Steven Spielberg to Mark Webb, who directed Snow White, saying that. And I also got a text from Steven kind of alluding to the fact that I had gotten the part before I had found out.
And then there was the question of Zegler's future. While she still had a handful of projects in the pipeline, including a much-hyped stage production in London, there was no denying that her star power had taken a massive hit. Casting directors and studio executives were reportedly wary of working with her, worried that she had become too polarizing, too unpredictable, too much of a risk. Even her most ardent defenders couldn't ignore the fact that she had become a magnet for controversy, the kind of star who seemed to bring as much trouble as she did talent. But here's the real twist. For all the chaos, for all the headlines, for all the speculation about her career being over, Rachel Zegler seemed unfazed. She continued to post on social media, sharing updates about her projects and cryptic messages that seemed to mock her critics. Whether this was a sign of resilience or hubris, only time would tell. But one thing was clear. The Rachel Zegler saga was far from over.
Your family's like a bunch of Disney, like crazy Disney people,
Yeah, they
right?
are,
Including your dad?
Yes, my mom and dad's wedding song was A Whole New World from Aladdin.
Wow.
I was bred for this.
Would they take you to Disneyland, Disney World when you were a kid?
I went to Disney World. Truly, like, that was our vacation, our yearly vacation, the four of us, my sister and my parents and I. And they go without us now.
So what do you think? Was Rachel Zegler unfairly scapegoated, or did she sabotage her own career? Is Disney making her the fall guy for a doomed project, or did she genuinely cross the line? Let us know your thoughts down below, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.